All right, so we're starting day 2 of solving absolute value equations and inequalities. So our essential question is, how can I solve absolute value inequalities? So we're doing the second half now.
Right. We're still talking about absolute value. It still means distance. But notice instead of an equal sign in this lesson, we're using an inequality. So in our first example here, we are talking about solutions that are less than 3. The absolute value of x is less than 3. So what that means is the solution set will be any numbers that are less than 3 units away from 0 in this case.
So we could break this up and write it as x less than 3, and then also x greater than a negative 3.
Right. That's exactly what's happening here. Okay. So, and notice it's a less than, so in that case it's going to be an and.
Yeah, if we have a less than sign, we think of it as the and.
And it's a conjunction. Down below here, we have the solutions of the absolute value of x greater than 3. So that means that the solutions are any numbers that are greater than 3 units away from 0. So that's why they're pointing in opposite directions.
And we like to write it this way, greater
right.
than. So you remember it's an or.
Right, because we know that 4, 5, 6, 7, all of those are more than 3 units away from 0. And -4, -5, and so forth. So if we go to the next page, we kind of talk about, this is a really good chart that you should spend some time, actually you should pause the video and take some notes and look at it. First of all, right here, this was from day 1. It just showing you that you write 2 separate equations with the word or in the middle.
And one's positive, one's negative.
Right. We're going to do the same thing today, but we're using inequalities.
Okay.
And so you're going to notice if your absolute value, if you have an absolute value of something and it's the less than sign, you know it's always going to be an and.
Okay.
If it's a greater than sign, it's going to be an or. And notice, again, whenever you have absolute value, you are going to have 2 separate inequalities. Because remember, it's a distance away from something.
Right.
So there's numbers to the right of it, and there's numbers to the left of it.
And so we stick with the positive one.
Yep.
And then when you change it to the negative, you have to flip the sign.
You have to. Just like dividing by a negative, you flip the sign. Exactly. And it's so, and here's a little hint that
the greater,
greater and less than.
Okay.
Here's a little helpful hint just to remind you when you're solving absolute value inequalities or equations. Number 1, you always have to isolate the absolute value expression. Meaning,
so look at the absolute value bars. Oh boy, I'm not in the video.
There here we go. There we go.
Look at the absolute value bars. See if there's anything on the outside of them. If there is, get rid of it.
Yep. If there isn't, then you don't. Then you're going to rewrite it as a compound inequality. So there's the word compound inequality, and then solve. So let's go.
So this one,
I'm going to float down to give you some room here.
We don't have anything on the outside of the outside the absolute value. So you can just rewrite it.
It's already isolated.
Q plus 2 is greater than or equal to 10.
Now notice what Miss Boyd did. She rewrote exactly what she saw. She just took away the absolute value.
Yep, and oops, not 3. And this time, let's get back here. Plus 2. I'm going to switch the
inequality and change the 10 to a negative 10. And now right away, I would do this right away. Is it an and or an or before you even go any further?
Well, I look at the original one.
Right.
And it says greater than.
Yep.
So I know it's going to be an or.
Correct. So let's write a big or there so we know.
All right.
All right. So now we start solving.
Perfect. We know how to do that.
Yep.
Minus 2. I get -4. Q is greater than or equal to
8.
8.
And we're going to divide by a negative.
So my sign flips again.
Yep.
So I'm going to have Q is less than or equal to
-2. And then or.
Or.
Let's solve the other side.
Let's do a different color.
Sure. Minus 2.
Minus 2. I get -4Q
is less than or equal to -12.
So I have -4. I'm dividing by a negative.
So
beep, beep, beep. Reminds you
there we go.
to flip the sign.
Again, yes.
Cancel. We're left with
Q is greater than or equal to +3. So should we rewrite it and then graph it? Okay.
So I've got Q is less than or equal to -2,
or
or
Q
Q
is greater than or equal to 3. Let's do our number line.
Okay.
We know -2 is
And a
on the
-2,
left, and we
I
know
got a
3 is
3.
on the right. We know we're going to have a closed circle on the -2, and we're going to go to the left.
So it's less than.
Yep. And then we're going to have a closed circle on the 3, and we're going to go to the right.
Right.
And we're done.
And that makes sense
Tip-
because it's an or.
Typically on ORs, but I'm saying typically,
Right, not always.
they're going to go opposite directions.
Okay.
Let's go on to the next page. Example 2.
Okay.
Okay, now notice
So let's
right away,
remember.
step 1.
Yes, we got to
Isolate.
And right here, I see there's a plus 36.
We have to
gotta get rid
minus
of that
36.
first. All right. So I'm going to get absolute value of 3x.
Yep, is greater than a -24.
Okay, now I have it by itself. Now I can split it up into my two
Yep,
scenarios.
perfect.
Okay, so I have 3x greater than -24
Yep.
and 3x less than +24.
And is it an and or an
Well,
or?
I'm going to look back up. I see that it's a greater
Yep.
than, so it's an or.
So let's write an or right there. And I would do that right away.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's solve.
All right.
So we're going to divide by 3. And since we're dividing by a positive, we don't have to flip the inequality. So it's x greater than -8. Or, and divide by 3. Again, the sign, the inequality stays the same. There we go. So the final answer then should be x is greater than -8 or x is less than 8. So let's maybe circle that. And then,
I'll highlight it.
oh yeah. I like that better. Where should we do the number line? Do we have room?
Right here. Yeah,
Okay.
I have room.
All right, great.
So I got an
8 and a
and a
-8. So let's do the -8 first.
Okay.
Maybe a color. Should we color it?
Yep.
Okay. Open and to the right because it's greater than. And on the 8, it's open and to the
left.
So right away, some of you are going to jump to this conclusion. And you're going to say,
just fill it all in right there. That's our answer.
Yep, that's exactly what some of you are going to do. You're going to color it in. Oh, it overlaps. No.
No, it's an or.
When it's an or, we're not looking for it overlapping. Remember, when it's an or, it can be either in this set or this
Or the
set.
other one.
So because our lines are covering the
All the
whole
way
number
negative
line,
and all the way positive.
your answer is going to be all real numbers.
So any number you put in there,
Yep.
as long as it's a real number, it'll work.
Exactly. All right, so that's example 2. Now let's go to example 3 because it is a little different.
All right.
And is
We
it
gotta
isolated?
isolate. No, we got to get rid of this 3.
No, right.
So we got to times by 3 on
right,
both sides.
both sides. So now,
So now I'm left with absolute value 2x plus 7 less than or equal to
3. Now we can write our 2 inequalities.
All right, so
So
I have
2x plus 7.
less than or equal to 3,
Yep,
and then 2x plus 7 greater than or equal to -3.
exactly.
And
Is it
we
an
look
and or an
ahead.
or?
Let's see, it was a less than.
Yep,
So it's an and.
Right.
So I'm going to put and right here.
and then I'm going to give you a little more room
Thank
to
you.
work here. So let's solve.
All right.
So we're going to subtract 7 on both sides.
So I'm left with 2x
Is less than or equal to -4.
divided by 2.
And we're dividing by a positive, so you don't have to change the inequality.
X is less than or equal to -2.
Right. And then the other side, we subtract 7 on both sides.
Oops, I almost wanted to write the answer.
There you go.
All right. So
You
then I
get 2x is greater than or equal to -10. Divide by 2.
2.
Now I'm going to stop Miss Boyd for a minute.
Yeah.
Because some of you are going to look at that, and I should have said it on the last one. You're going to say, oh, we have a negative. We have to flip the sign because of the -10.
That's what we divide by.
Right. So the answer then should
Dividing by a
be
positive, we leave it.
x is greater than or equal to.
-5.
So what's our final answer? Let's rewrite
The
it.
final answer is x less than or equal to -2
And
x greater than or equal to -5.
now I'm going to stop Miss Boyd one more time.
Okay.
We will give full credit for that answer right there in black.
Okay.
Some of you, though, however, are going to write it another way. And we're going to show you right now. That's where we're going to write the x in the middle.
Ah, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
always take this first one.
yep.
And then this one,
Yep.
you move this to this side.
Yep.
So I got the -5, but when
Correct.
you move it to the other side, you got to flip this
Sign.
So instead of a greater than, I'm going to have a less than or equal to.
Exactly. You will get full credit for either one.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that's clear.
Nice.
But we need a graph.
Yes.
So let me, oh boy, I can't really give you more room.
That's,
So where
can
do you
you
want
extend
to?
the page?
Oh, let's do that. Sure. There we go.
All right. So here's my graph. I've got a -5, got a -2.
Right.
All right. So I'm going to just go with this one.
Yep.
So x is less than or equal to -2. So that's a solid
Closed
circle.
and to the left.
And to the left.
And then -5.
That's closed.
And to
and
the
to the right.
correct.
And
It's an
this
and.
is an and.
So when it's an and, you're going to look for where they overlap. You must do what Miss Boyd did there where she highlighted it in green.
So that you know.
There we go.
Perfect.
Next page. Okay, this is actually a very important one to do.
Yes.
And I'll tell you why when we get to it.
Okay, so again, we got to isolate. We got to get rid of that guy.
Right.
So I'm going to divide both sides by -2.
Right.
I'm dividing by a negative.
So what happens?
We got to flip the sign.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to change it right here so that I remember.
Yeah.
That goes away.
Yeah.
So I'm left with absolute value of x plus 5. And now it flipped is less than a -5.
So I'm going to stop, Miss
Okay.
Boyd, right now. Because, or how do I say this? You don't always go back to the original to determine if it's an and or an or. You wait until the absolute value is isolated.
So
Then you
would be
determine.
x plus 5 less than -5.
So it's a less
So
than,
it's less
so it's an
than.
and. That's why we did this problem. Don't
Okay.
always go back to the original. Look where it's isolated and then
So I'm
determine.
going to write that right away. I'm going to put the and on.
Good.
Okay,
Okay.
so let's solve.
Mm-hmm.
I've got an x plus 5 less than -5
Yep.
and an x plus 5 greater than 5.
Perfect.
Okay, so
So we're going to subtract 5 for both sides.
I get x less than -10
Yep.
and
Subtract 5.
5. I get
X
x
is greater than 0. So your final answer, how about I give you a little more room? Why don't you rewrite the final answer
I have
in our
x
two forms.
is less than -10
and
x is greater than 0.
and that's one form.
Or you could write it
Like
and
this.
I always start with this.
Yep.
X less than -10.
Mm-hmm.
And then I bring my 0 and I flip my sign.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
So now
Let's graph it.
okay, so now if we graph that,
I've got a -10 and 0.
mm-hmm.
My first one says x is less than -10. So
Mhm.
open circle to the left.
Mm-hmm.
X is greater than 0. So open
Mhm.
circle. Oh, but it says it's an and.
Right.
Where's the overlap?
Exactly. So what do you think the final answer is going to be then? There is no overlap.
No solution.
Exactly. You have to pay close attention to that. If there isn't an overlap on an and, there is no
And
solution.
you have to write no solution to get full credit.
You have to. Correct.
So that we know you understand.
Yep. All right. Here's your video questions. See you tomorrow.